To help me explain the differences between the virtual world and the container world, I would like to tell you a story about Mary. Mary is a student looking for accommodation. In the virtual world, Mary is offered a series of castles. Some have large wardrobe spaces but nowhere to sleep. Some have lots of bedrooms, bathrooms, and even have swimming pools, whilst others have huge driveways but nowhere to store books. Each castle is very expensive. Mary simply doesn't have the resources to afford any of these. "This is ridiculous," she says. "I don't have many clothes or fancy ball gowns, but I do have lots of books to store. I don't know how to swim, and I only have one car." With a cheeky salesman smile, the accommodation officer says, "Ah, you only have one car at the moment, but you may have more in the future, and you might learn to swim and gain lots of fancy clothes. You may not need these things right now, but you may need these things in the future, and this gives you options." Frustrated with what's on offer, Mary says, "I simply don't have the resources or the desire to buy something that I probably won't use." And with that, she leaves the virtual world and enters the accommodation office in the container world. Unlike the virtual world, Mary is asked what her minimum requirements are. "Well," she says, "I need a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchen." And Mary is offered exactly that, 3 rooms, or in this case containers, each suited to her needs. One has a bedroom, the other is a bathroom, and lastly, a kitchen. "Great," Mary says, "but what happens when I have friends over? Where are they going to sleep?" "Well," says the accommodations officer, "in that case, we can either duplicate your current room or create you a new one, but you will only pay for what you need. Also, if you wanted to move to another building, we can replicate each room exactly as you have left them. Or, if you don't want a particular room, we can remove that for you." "Perfect," says Mary. "You see, virtualization requires upfront costs and resources. Some of these may not be needed or may be too little for the task at hand. Containers are lightweight. They perform specific functions or tasks and can be easily replicated for scale." Let's take a look at the differences between how the virtual world and the container world is set up. For the virtual setup, we obviously start with the host machine. This could be a server or it could even be your laptop. The host machine has a hypervisor, which is a virtual machine monitor, or VMM for short. The VMM allows us to create virtual machines that have virtual hardware and software. A virtual machine will have its own guest operating system, and of course, this is where the apps will live. Now, this is a very oversimplified view of how a virtual machine is set up, but the thing to remember here is that a virtual machine is a software-based environment which simulates a hardware-based environment. Let's now compare the virtual and container setups in a stacked view. First, we have our host machine and also our host operating system. In the virtual setup, we have a hypervisor that allows us to create our virtual machines. In the container setup, however, we have our Docker engine that manages the containers. A major difference between the two setups is that with virtualization, we rely on the hypervisor to manage and create our virtual machines. This, of course, creates a virtual set of resources which are siloed per environment. And each virtual machine requires its own guest operating system, libraries, and finally the application or applications themselves. However, in the container setup, we use the Docker engine to create and manage containers via a set of daemons connected to the host kernel. This isn't limited to Linux kernels, and Windows Server kernels can be used as well. It is important to remember that a container is ephemeral in nature. In production, many of the same containers will coexist and be removed or replaced without noticeable disturbance on the service. But what if you wanted to isolate Docker instances even further? Perhaps you may be tempted to have Docker running in virtual machines. Whilst this is possible, it is highly recommended to use the tool called Docker Machine. This tool allows you to install and access the Docker engine on virtual hosts. These virtual hosts will be tailored specifically for Docker and furthermore can be controlled remotely. We will touch on Docker Machine and delve even deeper into the Docker engine later on in this course.